Okay, so we are going to begin with looking at the cow eye. Again, this is our cornea here. So the cornea lays on top of the iris and the pupil and everything. It's that protective layer that is on the surface of our eye. If you have LASIK surgery or something like that, it's thin layers of the cornea that they remove from your eye to help kind of redirect the light going in. So I'm going to take the scalpel blade and I'm going to make a cut all the way around this cornea here. Now when I initiate that, this anterior chamber, this first layer here, is actually filled with what's referred to as the aqueous humor. And you might be able to see a little bit of that fluid coming out of there. It's definitely like a watery fluid, hence the term aqueous. And so it actually is found in the anterior compartment of the eye. And it flows down into the ciliary body and stuff like that, or ciliary area. I'm going to actually use the scissors to take this off. It makes it a little bit easier for me because, you know, if I can get in there. But this top layer is, it looks a little dark, almost like the cow had cataracts, but it's just what happens. So you can see now, here's that thin layer of the, actually it's really not thin at all, it's a relatively thick layer of the corneum. And that cornea allows, again, for the way that the light directs inside of the eye. And it sits on top of the surface of the eye. So the sclera is this dense fibrous layer here, and then it goes into this clear layer known as the cornea. Now, as we look inside, you can see here is the iris. This is the pigmented layer of the eye. So when you're looking at the eyes and you see blue or brown or green, that's what this iris is here. And you can see the opening here is the pupil. That's where the light is directed inside. And then this shiny area here, it's hard for you to tell, but this is actually the lens, and it's a very thick structure. And when we open up the posterior chamber, you'll be able to see that lens again in a little bit more detail. All right, so externally, this is what we're looking at. We have our sclera, we have the iris, the pupil, and then this lens inside there. And then we have our optic nerve down here, okay? So the next incision that we're gonna do is open up this posterior compartment back here. So again, I'm gonna take my scalpel blade and just a little bit down. I'm not gonna go all the way in the middle of it. I'm just gonna kind of, there's like a little flat layer here and then it starts to bulge. And I'm going to make an incision about right here. Now, the sclera, remember, is a very thick, dense, fibrous layer, so it takes a little bit of time to get into that. But once I get my scalpel blade in there, I can go ahead and using my scissors, I'm gonna actually cut all the way around again. Now, what I'm doing is opening up this posterior compartment. And so when I do that, there is another humor that is in this posterior compartment known as the vitreous humor. This vitreous humor is a much thicker layer. It's almost like a gel, a hair gel, if you think about it, or when you see it, it's like this hair gel. Now, opening this up, I'm going to show you the posterior compartment of the eye. And so I'm trying not to get the retina to pull up, which it wants to do. So if I pull that off, now you can see the inside of the eye. This here is the lens again. So it's this very round, thick layer. It's actually very dense, and it's what you see over here through that pupil. Now, this dark layer here is known as the ciliary bodies. And the ciliary bodies have suspensory ligaments that go all the way around this lens and hold the lens in place. Now, this thick layer here, if you see this fluid, this is the aqueous humor, and I'm gonna point that out a little bit in just a moment, but I wanna show you some things about this lens in detail, if I can. Trying to get a little bit of light here. Okay. But if you look, you can see this lens, how it's very thick. But if you notice going around here, all of these little ridges, that's the ciliary body. And then I'm going to slightly push on this lens. And by doing that, if I can, if you notice how it's moving just a little bit, that's going to be the suspensory ligaments that are basically attached to the lens that adjust the way that the lens contracts, depending on the amount of light that's coming in, depending on if you're looking and focusing on something up close or something off in the distance. These suspensory ligaments, you can see them right there, really help adjust that lens and that focusing power of the lens on the retina. Okay, so hopefully y'all can see that there. Again, that's our ciliary body, and then the suspensory ligaments represented there. And then this is our lens. Now, if we look in this posterior compartment, you see all of this fluid inside here. This is the aqueous, the vitreous humor. And if I go like this and scoop it out, it kind of shows you how it's very gel-like structure. It's a very thick fluid. It actually allows and continues to keep the posterior compartment, I guess, with pressure inside of it and things like that. Okay, so this is that vitreous humor, the vitreous humor. So I'm going to just kind of put that here on top of our lens again. Now, unfortunately, when I took that out, my thin layer, the retina, kind of pulled up here. But if I kind of spread it back out a little bit gently, you can see the different layers. So on the outside, this is our sclera, that very dense fibrous layer. And then this yellow layer inside here, this very, very thin layer, is what we call the retina. And then if you see this dark layer, this is the choroid. So that's the middle layer. The choroid is our vascular layer. And I could actually pull that choroid away from the sclera. If I can get the probe down inside there. And there we go. So you can see how it is a completely different layer. Okay, as I pull that down. That is our choroid. Now, the retina is attached. What we're not really seeing, and what I've only seen maybe once or twice in all of the cow eyes I've ever done, was the fovea centralis and macula lutea. But what you can see is where all of this is, the retina is kind of pulled into this one little spot here. This is what's known as the optic disc, because right here at the optic disc is where the optic nerve comes out. So remember, the retina is our neural layer, and all of this, these neurons, these fibers are running into that optic disc, creating this optic nerve, and then the optic nerve carries it back to the brain. So this retina, very, very thin layer, very thin, and you can see how it's all, I can't even take it out because it's all attached right at this area known as the optic disc. Now, hopefully, as I'm doing this, what you see again is all this pretty shiny stuff down here. Now, this is found in a lot of animal eyes. This is known as the septum lucidum. This is why animals, when you shine lights in their eyes at night, they glow. Because our choroid in humans, the choroid is just all dark pigmented layer. In animals, they have this reflective layer as well. And so that helps improve their overall night vision. And so they're able to see more accurately at night, and it kind of allows for the light to be reflected inside. So you would not see this in human eyes, but we do see it in the cow eye, and that's what's referred to as the septum lucidum. Okay, so we have our retina here, that very thin neural layer. okay? We have our choroid with the septum lucidum, and then if we pull the choroid down and away, this, even though it doesn't look white here, it's kind of, you know, pigmented from the choroid, this thick outer layer here is our sclera. And that is basically the parts of the eye. If I pull out this vitreous humor and I just kind of dop it back in there, I want to show you real quick this retina, or this lens here, how thick it is again. I love kind of seeing it in there like that. Okay, and that's our dissection.